Hey, this is Shilpa here, and welcome to my blog series on miasms. And I'm answering questions by my students from my Argentum mentoring program on miasms, miasmatic treatments, miasmatic remedies, and more. So, all the issues that they've had in understanding and eliminating miasmatic blocks in their patients, those questions are, they've submitted those, and I'm taking one question at a time, answering them for you. So this time I have a question on remedies. How to study a miasmatic remedy at different stages, and how to determine which miasm is dominant in a specific remedy. Now, this is very, very important because we've covered a few questions on the basics of what miasms are, different types of approaches, and then we've covered some questions on the treatment of miasms, single miasms, multiple miasms, and now we're coming to remedies. And when we talk about miasmatic remedies, there's something very important to understand, that remedies are nothing but artificial diseases and expressions that are documented through provings on healthy people. So, any well-proved, clinically tested remedy with a full-blown chronic picture developed at all 4 stages can be used as a miasmatic remedy, regardless of what it is made from. Obviously, there are some special miasmatic remedies made from special sources, but in general, any remedy can be a miasmatic remedy. So now the question is, how do you recognize the miasm in a remedy? Again, it's exactly the same process with which you recognize the miasm in a patient. So you can determine the miasm in a remedy using any of the 3 approaches that I've spoken about. You can use the Hahnemannian approach, the Kentian approach, or the Sankaran's approach, depending on how well proved that remedy is and what kind of clinical information we have for that remedy in the Mater Medica. These are our limiting, aspects here. Now, I've discussed these approaches in my past blog videos in detail, so I encourage you to check that. But let me quickly summarize what kind of information do you need in remedies to determine the miasm, okay, based on that approach. So for Hahnemannian miasms, to determine the miasm in remedies based on Hahnemannian approach, the most crucial information you need is the fundamental root triggering factor or the causative factor. Now, this is identified based on, in patients, it's identified based on past history or, what has happened in their past. In remedies, Hahnemann has identified it for us. So there are 3 remedies that he has spoken about, or say 6 remedies he has spoken about, that cover the 3 root triggers, miasmatic triggers, through his clinical work. However, there are many more acquired factors that have been determined in practice by old and new masters, especially in the last 2 centuries. So we have these contemporary Hahnemannian miasmatic issues, and the easiest way to determine is to know the source of the remedy. If the remedy is made from a miasmatic agent, then it innately covers the primary root cause. So remedies made from nosodes, which are infective agents, from tautopathic remedies made from, conventional drugs, toxicological remedies made from toxins, biotoxins, toxicants, environmental toxins. All these remedies are special remedies made from fundamental miasmatic causes. While they're not all well proved, to see a developed picture at all 4 stages, clinically they have been seen to cover all 4 stages when prescribed based on the not been well since miasmatic trigger. Right? So to prescribe them, the information you need in your patient is the causative fundamental factor that triggered the patient through their past history, and these specialized remedies can kickstart the healing journey in your patient without suppression. Now, for Kentian miasmatic remedies, to determine the miasm in remedies based on Kentian approach, you need to know the secondary miasmatic patterns of every miasm. Now we have 5 key Kentian miasms. Each one has its own unique pattern, own unique expression. You can elicit that from the proving data of most well-proved remedies. There are different Kentian authors who have documented and classified remedies for you based on 3 or 4 miasms from their clinical work. I will show you in a moment how you can do that in your from your remedies in your Mathemedica. I'm also writing a Mathemedica book where I'll be classifying remedies based on stages in miasmatic analysis. So keep a watch on that. So the reason I'm doing that is because Kentian approach, miasmatic approach, is the most practical, the most comprehensive miasmatic approach for all patients who express at stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? So it goes across the spectrum, and you can, use this data to find remedies even when there is no known miasmatic trigger or causative factor in the past history, because the Kentian understanding believes that this sort of trigger has happened in the family history, in one of the parent or the grandparent, and those traits are inherited, right? So this is your bread and butter approach for almost 90% of your everyday chronic cases. Now let's go to Sankaran miasmatic approach and Sankaran's miasmatic remedies. To determine the miasm in remedies based on Sankaran's miasmatic approach, you need to know the root situation and the co-delusion of the remedy. Now remember, most of this information is not found directly in our provings. It needs to be derived from provings through specific symptoms like fears, dreams, and delusions. Now, this in itself is a huge limitation, because while this miasmatic approach holds a lot of promise for patients who present at stage 4 and 3, it is not necessarily the most practical approach, especially for beginners, because they can get overwhelmed, and also for some experienced practitioners who may not want to spend time and skills to learn a new process to determine the root situation in remedies and patients. So you have to understand that even if you know the remedy miasm based on Hahnemannian and Kentian approaches, you can still cover almost all of your everyday cases when it comes to working with miasmatic unblocking, right? So now, with that said, I will show you the process of how you determine the miasm in a remedy, and I will show you I'll demonstrate that to you through the example of the remedy sulfur, and let's go there, right? So to start with, sulfur is an antipsoric remedy based on Hahnemannian miasm. Why? You check Hahnemann's chronic diseases, theory and practice, and that's where he writes. So this is based basically on his clinical understanding, right? So he said for more than 2000 years, sulfur has been found a most efficacious remedy against itch, while not a single physician noticed that this was affected by the law of similars. The itch, which is so common among workers in wool, causes a sort of unbearable, agreeable tingling, itching, gnawing as from lice. Described by some as an intolerable, voluptuous itching, tickling, which stops as soon as the finger is applied to it, to scratch it and then begins to burn. After scratching, it continues to burn on that spot. This is the secondary manifestation of the itch. This virtue of sulfur against itch was abused to drive away itch from skin by external applications, but the internal malady remains uncured. And this eventually manifests in the form of, if in another form, breaking out by a great number of tedious diseases of most varied kind, which is what he calls secondary sora, after the cutaneous eruption has been suppressed by sulfur ointments, in the same way as syphilitic chancres have been destroyed by local applications. So what he's saying is that the itch was suppressed, that primary itch, and when it's suppressed, it manifests as secondary infection, secondary manifestations that percolate through the entire organism. That's what sora miasm is. sulfur is the number one remedy. He's given some other remedies like hepatic sulf as well, but that's all he's spoken about. And then any other well-proved remedy at all 4 stages will become an antisoric, according to him, to work on the secondary manifestations. So that is Sora, and that is sulfur for you from Hahnemann, right? However, sulfur is a multi-miasmatic remedy now based on Kentian miasmatic understanding, but it does have a dominant Sora, which means the most dominant symptoms in sulfur are of Sora, but you also see other miasmatic patterns in sulfur. So you can find this, what remedy belongs to what miasm, based on some Kentian authors who follow Kentian homeopathy from their miasm books. You can derive this yourself if you know and understand miasmatic indication based on Kentian homeopathy. So for this, my number one book to find the miasm is Fatek. So let's look at Fatek and look at why sulfur is multi-miasmatic according to Kentian miasmatic understanding. So let's look at soric sulfur. What is Sora according to Kent? All the functional, mental, nervous, hormonal, immune issues in the body are soric. So in this case, the first stage of any inflammatory symptoms like irregular circulation, local burnings, throbbing, congestion, flushes of heat, rush of blood to the head and the chest and the heart, all this is soric manifestation of sulfur. So remember, persistent inflammation, redness of orifices is pseudosora. Okay, defective assimilation in spite of voracious appetite and the patient is emaciating, this is tubercular. The child looks dried up, little old man, big head, belly, emaciated limbs, defective nutrition and metabolism. This particular part is pre-diabetic state. It is a tubercular state. So you can see every symptom is a different miasmatic pattern. And what I encourage my students to do is use 3 or 4 colors, and for each of the miasmatic symptom, you put that particular color. And at the end of the whole thing, find out what color dominates. That's the dominant miasm. Let's look at the next symptom, mucus discharge acrid, blood streak. This is a tubercular miasm going towards syphilis. Then you find serous effusions, deposits, absorb slowly. This is psychosis. Then you have affinity for the skin, heat and burning. This is Sora. Then you have stoop, unwashed look, offensive in spite of washing. That's Sora. Then glands are indurated and suppurating. This is tubercular. Weak fainting spells. This is Sora. Empty sick feeling. This is Sora. Sensation of overfilled, rough numbness. Again, a soric state. Epilepsy. So epilepsy is Sora because it is the abnormal electric activity in the brain. The child jumps and starts and screams fearfully. This is again Sora, hypersensitivity. So if you look at and create a graph, you will see that the majority of the symptoms are Sora. So you have a strong Sora. The next one, which is dominant, is tubercular, then psychosis, and then syphilis. So if you're looking at these 4 key miasms, you find that Sora is dominant, but it's a multi-miasmatic remedy according to Kentian analysis, right? Now, remember, all these symptoms are expressed at different stages, right from stage 4 to stage 1. Stage 4 is mostly symptoms which are constitutional, personality traits. Those are more stage 4 symptoms. If you have not been well since sort of a miasmatic factor based on clinical information, that's again stage 4. Stage 3 is where you have exciting factors that create, generals, physical, mental, you create keynotes. These are stage 3 symptoms. Stage 2 symptoms are symptoms that are expressed locally in different organs and systems, and stage 1 generally are pathological diagnostic symptoms. So these can manifest in any form. Those are the different stages, right, within Sora. Then now, if you come to Sankaran, he places sulfur as an antisoric. And he's basing his understanding from what Hahnemann has classified these remedies into. Now, why is sulfur Sora according to Sankaran? If you look at his writings and his books, he writes, sulfur has fear of poverty. So you're looking at fears. Then sulfur has a delusion, he's getting thin. He's talking about business. He has delusions of being disgraced. Again, he's looking at all those deep, delusions and imaginations. He imagines himself a great man, though ignorant, despises literary men and education. So the root situation, according to Sankaran, in sulfur is about a person who is embarrassed and disgraced. He's lost something and he's coping by struggling to recover that loss. The loss could be his identity, his ego, his money, his business, it could be anything. But this is the struggle he's going through. The situation is hopeful. So when you have a situation that is hopeful, and when you are struggling and you believe that you are anxious, but you know that this is a rectifiable situation, this coping mechanism is Sora based on Sankaran's understanding. And hence he's classified sulfur as a soric remedy. So can you see there is a much more in-depth understanding that you need to, and Sankaran has classified different remedies, not all, obviously, 100 remedies probably into different miasms, but this is the start of how you can, look at miasms using his analysis. So again, watch out for the stages Matura Medica, where I will be classifying all our top remedies into miasms and stages based on these 3 different approaches. But now the next question is, how do you know sulfur will work as a Hahnemannian miasmatic remedy or a Kentian remedy or as a Sankaran's miasmatic remedy? This is important, right? So the best part is that in homeopathy, that same remedy can act at different stages by just changing the potency. So whether it's going to work at stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4 is determined by what is the potency that you're using, right? So that brings us to the next question on potency and miasms. I'm going to cover that in my next video. So hope that helps. If you have more questions, if you think, you need more clarity on something, bring them on. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.